Yeah, our attorney on who is on Zoom said he can't hear anything on Zoom because the main feed is muted and they need to unmute it.
I can hear you guys now.
Thank you. Okay. Let me introduce this. So this is consideration of certification of Plan Manitou 2.0, our revision to the comprehensive plan that we spent a year working on. I just wanted to introduce Darcy and just say a couple things that I had identified in my staff report. But this request is for the Planning Commission to certify the current draft of Plan Manitou 2.0 as the comprehensive plan for the city of Manitou Springs. Plan Manitou 2.0 is an update to the original Plan Manitou that was adopted in 2017. We'll be talking about the background and existing conditions and what we've been doing over the past year, as well as talk about the public involvement. We've had a very robust public engagement process, as you are all aware of. I did want to make one thing, identify one thing, and I put it in my packet. After the completion of the draft, we received two more suggestions. Two more suggestions were presented by a city councilor to be included in the list of priorities for the city. One was consideration of working on the establishment of a community center, and number two, working on the establishment of an appropriate council chambers. That was all the information that I received. We can talk about that at the end of this presentation, but if the Planning Commission wishes, we can probably pretty easily put those two things under the list of long-term actions that were identified. And so we'll get into more about that at the end of the presentation. But I'll give it up to Darcy and she will make her presentation.
Great. Thank you, Fred. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Darcy White with Clary and Associates. Very happy to be here. We are, as Fred mentioned, on the wind down end of this project. So as you all are aware, Plan Manitou 2.0, as we've called it, is essentially a targeted update to the original Plan Manitou, which was adopted in 2017. And the 2017 plan actually was preceded by.
Could you get a little closer to the mic?
Sure.
So people online can hear.
Blast you out.
Yeah.
And the 2017 plan actually was preceded by several other plans that the community had worked on over the years. The vision plan was a big part of that process kind of leading into that. So there's been an evolution over time of this plan. And so we were asked to do a sorry, my PowerPoint is acting very strange. Targeted update to this, focusing primarily on the background and trends data, which informs the plan, things like population, housing trends, economic trends, looking at recent plans and studies that have been done since 2017 that needed to align with this plan. And then also confirming with the community that the vision and values that are reflected in Plan Manitou still resonated with the community. But the real primary outcome of the process, in addition to those things, was to focus on the strategic priorities. And so we met with the City Council and the Planning Commission a month ago, met with the community prior to that, to really talk about those strategic priorities. So leading into that, I also wanted to emphasize that in 2017, Plan Manitou was developed in conjunction with the city's hazard mitigation plan. That was a huge undertaking. The two plans were kind of fully integrated, which is not something that was kind of common practice. That was a pretty innovative approach that the city took on to make sure that the community was fully aware of, kind of what the hazards are in Manitou Springs, how that relates to land use and kind of plans for the community. So in 2023, which is kind of the 5-year cycle that's required by FEMA, the city went through an update of the hazard mitigation plan. And the thought at the time was that maintaining that hazard mitigation plan, which is a very technical plan. There's a lot of technical information analysis that feeds into that used to be in the appendix of Plan Manitou, that it would be better maintained as a standalone plan. And so just wanted to emphasize that the essential framework of the hazard mitigation plan that kind of was born in 2017, the goals, the policies that really focused on those things still have been carried forward in this update of the plan. But you do now have a standalone hazard mitigation plan that the city is revisiting every 5 years according to that FEMA guidance. So in terms of that overall timeline, as Fred indicated, we started just about a year ago, and we've really been looking at, trying to engage the community and the elected and appointed officials at every step of the process. In terms of the community at large, we've had a number of opportunities over the last year, kind of starting in the, our big push was in the July timeframe. Before we got into drafting, we shared the results of the plan assessment that was done to kind of evaluate progress since 2017. We did a whole series of informational question of the week. We shared a little bit about what the plan is, kind of what's happening in terms of the trends, and then asked folks to weigh in on questions on different topics. And then we did a strategic priorities survey at that time as well. And also some in-person events. So we had a pop-up booth at the Ice Cream Social and the Day of Friendship in July, and 2 different community meetings, one in July and one in January. We also worked with a set of working groups, which were organized around the different topics or elements in the plan. We had a couple of our commissioners involved in those working group meetings. The intent of having those groups, which were established by City Council, was to have kind of a core group of people in the community who could really, cared about specific issues, could kind of weigh in and help us vet the plan as we went through the process. So we had 3 different rounds of meetings with our working groups. Starting with April, we went through every section of the plan and asked each group to kind of tell us, how well are we doing in your opinion, based on what you're seeing in the community as residents, as business owners. And then what do you see as those priorities moving forward? We presented some preliminary priorities based on that initial review in July. And then we kind of refined that again and brought it back to the group in January of this year. We also had several meetings with the city departments. I think this plan is a really key component in how the city kind of works day to day. It provides policy guidance, but it also helps establish a work plan for city staff in many ways. And so each of the departments kind of took the lead of reviewing their respective sections, how well that aligns with, kind of what their immediate priorities are, what their longer time priorities are, and kind of what's been accomplished. And so a big part of keeping this plan current and, kind of making sure it really reflects what's happening with the city is having those departments engage. And so Fred's been great about kind of, convening those groups, those different department heads at different times, and kind of helping make sure that we've got alignment in that area as well. And then we've also had, as you are aware, multiple meetings, either individually with the Planning Commission and the City Council, or we did do 2 joint meetings. And we wanted to convene those joint meetings because we find it's really important to have conversations about, what each group thinks is important, and kind of help vet some of the questions that came up in that larger forum. So that was a really helpful exercise for us, and hopefully for those bodies as well. So in terms of what we heard through the process, in terms of kind of, what's happened since 2017, I think the general sentiment was there's a lot that's been accomplished. It was a very ambitious plan when it was put forth in 2017, partially because there was a lot happening in Manitou at that time. You were recovering from flooding and adjacent fires and, kind of dealing with that hazard mitigation aspect, but also a very involved community who has a lot of ideas and, really cares about the community. And so we ended up with a pretty long to-do list. But you guys had really tackled a lot of it. Based on the analysis that was done, about 55% of the actions that were developed as part of that 2017 plan were completed in that 5-year period. Keeping in mind, this is a 10 to 20-year plan. So, we often get the question of, well, when is the plan going to be done? When are we going to wrap this thing up? And it's really an ongoing process with a comprehensive plan. So to see that kind of progress in a pretty short period of time was pretty impressive to us, and I think to several of the community members as well. The other thing that came out through that evaluation is really just helping folks understand that there are a lot of things that are being done to help implement the plan that are just ongoing. The city is constantly working on parking, for example. That is not something you're going to solve in one day, or traffic. You're continually looking at different projects and kind of thinking about how do we improve. And so there are a lot of actions that are ongoing, continuation from 2017. And then the smaller portion, less than 20% of what was originally identified, hadn't been started yet. So lots of good progress made. I think one of the things that really drove this effort and kind of, as I mentioned, kind of inspired this desire for a more strategic list of priorities is that it had become pretty unmanageable. It was really challenging for staff to kind of try to figure out where to go next. You get questions about a particular topic and, how do we really kind of filter through that? So for staff, as well as for elected and appointed officials. So those were some of the challenges, but I think what we did here clearly is that what was important to the community in 2017 is still important to the community today. And I would say that, kind of went back to 20 years before, or whatever the timeline was for the vision plan before that. The big ideas of kind of what makes Manitou Manitou and what people really care about has been very consistent through each iteration of your plans. And so that is something that we didn't really change through this process. What we heard from the community was, yes, those things are still important. Maybe we need to think about how we make, changes in terms of how we implement those priorities, but those are still our priorities. So in terms of the substance of the plan, what we heard was, let's double down and keep doing what we're doing. And, we may need to add some new things here and there, but the goals and policies still make sense. In terms of implementation, I think I would characterize it as a fair bit of recalibration. There's some things that maybe there was a thought process about how something could be implemented in 2017. A lot's changed in 5 years. And so trying to recalibrate some of those actions to kind of reflect where the city is today, what the known factors are in terms of that implementation approach. We also heard a desire, particularly on the part of the city council and city leadership, to really kind of focus energy moving forward. Try to be more strategic, focus on getting some additional bigger projects that have been ongoing for a number of years completed before taking on a lot of new ones. So the city has continued to have a lot of focus on infrastructure improvements. Fred mentioned in his previous presentation some of the mobility centers and hubs and other things that have been going on. So there's a lot of projects that are ongoing. And I think the general sentiment was, let's kind of keep those on our near-term radar, and then we can kind of revisit some of those longer-term actions as we go. So in terms of what's new in this draft, in terms of the main body of the plan, the introduction has been updated to reflect this process, the 2.0 process. There is an updated community profile, which I mentioned is kind of the trends piece of it, kind of the facts and figures about Manitou. But the updated action plan is really the core, kind of brand new piece of this. And I'll talk a little bit about what's in that. So, the community profile, the one thing I want to mention here is that in terms of kind of evolution of the plan over time, in 2017, you had a, kind of big meaty appendix in the back of the plan that contains some of that information. It's now all online in what's called a story map format, where you can have, you can zoom in on the maps, take a look at, kind of different things, learn more about the community. So it's meant to be more accessible for the community, but also easier for staff to maintain over time. So that's a kind of an evolution that came out of this process. And then jumping into the action plan specifically, there are 3 types of actions that are identified in this iteration of the plan: the strategic priorities, which are generally a 1 to 3 year time frame. So kind of things that are ongoing, things that will be completed within that time frame. And that's really intended to align with, it's something that can be accomplished with existing available resources, both staffing and financial means, and really is kind of meant to guide the work program for city departments. And then we have those ongoing priorities that I mentioned. And, those are just kind of chugging along in the background. Some of them are going to go on indefinitely. Some of them might be completed the next time you take a look at this. But those really reflect, kind of the bread and butter of what the departments are doing on a daily basis. And then we have the long-term actions, which are kind of the 4 years and beyond timeframe. And that list kind of shifted around in this iteration. A lot of things that had been identified as long-term in the 2017 plan actually had been completed in the 5-year timeframe. And so there's just been a lot of reshuffling and recalibrating, as I mentioned, to kind of help things go through that process. And we really used the public process to help us identify and kind of complete that shuffling process and vet that. So in terms of kind of, looking at it by the numbers, there's about 250 actions total in the plan. About 122 of those are currently underway or ongoing. About 97 were carried over from the 2017 plan with some updates. And, I mentioned a couple examples. We've just really evaluated each one. Some of them maybe haven't changed at all. Others have been kind of tweaked to reflect those current conditions or new information, changes in who's the lead, that type of thing. And then there's 30 in the plan that are brand new. And I think, in some cases, those reflected feedback from citizens who, had new ideas or learned new things about a particular issue that was important to the community and kind of wanted to see that added. In other cases, it came from, departments or the working groups identifying things that hadn't been contemplated at that time. So the process of identifying those strategic priorities really was kind of this filtering down process over the course of the last year. And once we got to our preliminary list, we vetted that with City Council and Planning Commission, as well as the city departments, and then took it back to kind of refined it, and then took it back to the working groups and the community. And that's kind of what got us to this point today. So as of the current draft, we have 25 strategic priorities, 15 of which are currently underway. 4 were carried over from near-term priorities identified in 2017, and 6 are new. We did get, with this group and City Council last month, we did kind of add a couple new priorities from that previous draft based on the feedback we got from the community, and that was, kind of confirmed by the 2 bodies. And the other piece of this that fed into and kind of helped evaluate the strategic priorities that's new in this iteration of the plan is the screening criteria. And you can see these address things like, kind of who's taking the lead on this project. Is it a city-led effort? Is it community-led? What's the fiscal impact of those projects? Do we have staff capacity for those things? And kind of looking at different tiers within that. And then also looking at how a particular action relates to the community values that are really central to the plan. So things like hazard mitigation, resilience, sustainability, and then also what we are calling kind of the bang for the buck or the social impact. Is this something that really is important to the community? And there's sort of a bonus point structure there for those types of actions. And then based on feedback from our discussions with the departments, we also added an additional bonus for a city council directed effort. We understand that, priorities change over time. There may be something that bubbles to the surface 6 months from now that really wasn't contemplated. And so this is really intended to provide a tool for staff to help, kind of evaluate priorities as things change over time. So that's kind of a new tool intended to provide a little bit more objectivity to the evaluation process. So in terms of how the action plan is intended to be used, I mentioned that Plan Manitou is a 10 to 20-year plan, but this action plan is really meant to be a kind of a 2 to 3 year plan cycle in terms of its review. You want to keep this current. It's, kind of needs to be kind of monitored and looked at pretty regularly, depending on things like funding, staffing, and city council direction. So it's meant to be fluid and the most living part of this document. The other thing that we have done in this process is created a structure outside of kind of the PDF plan, the version that will live on the website that staff has access to, which is it's an Excel file. Each, section of the plan, whether it's transportation and mobility or housing, has a tab in this Excel sheet. All the actions are in there. Staff has notes related to kind of what the status is. We also have tracked, kind of where those things came from. So it was important for us to really kind of make sure that there was some longevity to that. So if, this a particular action was identified through public engagement, staff can see that, bring that information back to you. If something comes forward and someone says, we really want to focus on this, you have a little bit more context, kind of without having to go back out to the community initially. So that is all we have in terms of the kind of the overview of the plan. I'm happy to answer questions, but I think as Fred indicated, our hope tonight is to have you consider whether or not you're ready to certify the plan and send it to City Council. I know we have a couple specific questions that came up, but the intent would be, if that is the case, that we would proceed to City Council in April on April 15th. So I will stop there and I'll let Fred take it from there.
Any comments or questions for Darcy?
I'm not sure what certified means.
Actually, when I said certify, I'm taking the language right out of state law or state statutes. And that's just something that's been in my brain for most of my career. But the state statute says that a planning commission shall certify to the city council or to its board of county commissioners, certify a comprehensive plan for the community. I believe it means approve. Yeah.
Not yet. It's a public hearing first. We have to. I have a couple comments, but I'll wait to see if there's any. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to comment on this? Okay, then I'll close the public hearing. So I've just got a few things that I don't know if we can bring the plan up or I can, on page 105 is my first one.
Hillside Conservation?
Pardon?
Hillside Conservation, is that what you're looking at?
No, this is it's actually page 105 of 279 in the packet. It's key issues and opportunities. This is in the introduction about Plan Manitou. And, you know, it talks about aging population, affordable workforce housing, shifting demographics. And this is picky, but if we could possibly change it, it says the number of non-family households, that is, those without children, surpass those with children. And I was kind of makes me feel like I'm not in a family, and I feel like I'm in a family. So I was wondering if we could, instead of saying number of non-family households, just say number of households without children. I think so, but I mean, that's just a language thing I think would be nice, because we've, you know, when we were doing the code update, we went round and round and round, what's a family, what's not a family. We took family out of the code just because it was, you know, inflammatory and throughout this, you know, land use. So that's the easy one. Then on page 199, the future land use. In here, we show it's in the packet, it's page 199 in our packet. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, that's it. Along Becker's Lane, there's that red pink hashed area that's gateway mixed use, and that's kind of outdated because all but the one lot on the, I guess it would be the northwest corner of El Paso Boulevard and Becker's have been rezoned to residential. And there's a reference a couple of pages down. And I'll have to get it to you, but it talks about, it mentions the Becker's Lane Lodge and doing something with it. And that basically was scraped and turned into townhouses about 3 years ago. So, the reason I bring this up is because this confusion sort of carried over 3 years ago when we're doing the LUDC update, and the consultants saw that and they started thinking a complete different zone. And that area has just sort of evolved into all residential, with the exception on the corner. There's what used to be the I was daycare, and it had a hair salon. Now it's actually a factory where they make the ski furniture. But everything else on that side of Becker's and along El Paso is residential to the west. Now, I can send you some more email. I'll just email you more detail of, because there's somewhere else I didn't write it down, unfortunately, where we referenced the Becker's Lane Lodge. So then the only other one is on 201. And this is, I'm not sure how important this is. This is the This shows the wildfire risk areas. And again, if you look at Becker's Lane, everything to the west is fairly appropriately shown as moderate wildfire risk, but I would think all that area to the east is a pretty high risk. I mean, it's the same wildfire risk. It's the exact same type of stuff. And, you know, this, we've probably had this represented incorrectly since 2017. I just sort of noticed that. I don't know if we have the tools to update that and yeah.
So we may want to consider, my recollection is when the 2017 plan was done, there were many different iterations and different types of
Yeah.
wildfire maps. And this was sort of a more generalized version. I think we'd need to check with the hazard mitigation team and see whether this is still, you know, the appropriate one to show in the comp plan. We did not make any changes to this. You're correct.
Yeah.
From that original map.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, well, it's just, I just wanted to point it out
Yeah.
as a area that this is probably more important to have it right in the hazard mitigation plan, but
okay.
I'm sure the fire department recognizes the risk in that area. So that's all I have. Are there any other? So I guess, then, do you have anything to add, Darcy, or you? Okay,
Thank you.
so I guess we could take a motion to approve or recommend approval to city council.
I'll move that we certify Plan Manager 2.0.
Do they need to consider those two other actions, Fred?
I'll second that.
I'm sorry.
Just for discussion, there's wanted to point out those two recommendations from the city councilor. So you can decide if you want to include those or not.
And that we include those two recommendations.
Wait, time before we do that. My question is, the city councilor approached you, but it wasn't a general discussion with city council and the mayor? It was a separate aside conversation?
Correct. It was via email.
Because I would think that we've gone through so many things and so much evaluation on what's been included. I wouldn't want to include those without, I mean, there's a couple things. One, we're a 4,500 person community with whether we need a separate council chambers and community center. I mean, I think that's a bigger discussion maybe for above our pay grade.
Yeah, I think the city councilor who recommended those can bring that up in April.
Okay, I'll remove those two from my motion.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, if no discussion, then all those in favor? Okay. On to city council. Okay, then we'll move on. The next item of business is annual legal training.
Yeah, thanks very much. So under the other business, this is, these are actually just updates. We're not doing, we're not actually doing the legal training today. I was talking with our attorney, and we thought it would be better if we actually conduct the training in April. When we had less agenda, I wasn't exactly sure how many people would show up to these two agenda items tonight. But I wanted to let you know, apologies for if it was misleading on the agenda, but just as an update, we've scheduled the legal training for April, for your April meeting.
Okay, that's good. We'll hopefully have more attendance than anyway. Okay,
And then I can comment on the standard operating procedures.
Sure.
That was something that we also, we put here as a placeholder, but we did find a draft of some operating procedures that the Planning Commission had apparently worked on maybe about 5 years ago or so, or maybe it was in 2021. And so I think what we would plan to do is have that in the packet for you to review during your April meeting as well. Just wanted to point that out before we sprang that on you or anything like that today.
yeah, oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, we actually, we talked about that, I think it was 2021. And then we went through some significant staff changes. And so we never brought it back because there were just a bunch of red lines that needed to be reviewed by an attorney. Things like what's meeting, is it 2, is it 3, and stuff like that. So that'll be great.
So we'll do that and we'll make sure that that's on April's agenda.
Okay, are there any notice of council action or updates?
Trying to think. No, I don't think there's any, no council action. One thing to expect, April's agenda is starting to fill up, but we should expect to, we don't have any particular land use cases, but we are updating we're updating sections in the land use code and in the municipal code for stormwater management. And so we should have a package of that to bring to the Planning Commission in April. It should not be controversial, famous last words, but it's some of that cleanup that we're doing.
Okay, are we going to be doing anything with the ADUs, or is that?
Yep, that is also on the table. And I'm working with our attorneys to understand the legal requirements and some of and also I make sure that I understand the alternatives that we have so I can present all of that to Planning Commission.
Okay, and I'll just give one update. Just if you're curious today, on Friday, the judge who's hearing the short-term rental case in Woodland Park is going to be making a decision. So that'll be interesting, just based on, to see where they go with that. So that'll probably be front page in the Gazette on Saturday or something. So if there's nothing else, then let's adjourn the meeting.